Everybody, my name is Keith with Honeybee Honey. Today I'm talking all about bottom boards. It doesn't seem like that important of a subject, but I think that after you're done viewing the video you have a few more tools in your tool shed. Today I'm talking about solid bottom boards versus ventilated bottom boards. I'm not going to show you how I put one together, but I'll explain it, and I'll show you how you can make these solid bottom boards last the rest of your life. And one little trick that might help you catch swarms and keep your bees from getting eaten by spiders. So if you want to learn that, stay tuned. So today I'm talking about bottom boards. And the reason I'm talking about bottom boards is because there seems to be a lot of confusion with newer beekeepers, and some old beekeepers don't realize it either. But I'm mainly going to be talking about a solid bottom board, but I'm going to give you some advantages and disadvantages of this versus a ventilated bottom board, and a couple little tricks, not in putting them together, but in how they function. So solid bottom boards. Their function is basically to make it so that the beehive can be defensible. They have a bottom. Natural beehives, sometimes you can see them out in the open. They don't have a bottom, or even some sides sometimes. Sometimes they're open. Bees can live like that, but it's harder for them to defend their hive like that. So a bottom board does a couple things for us. It seals off the hive, makes the hive defensible, and it makes it so that we can move the hive. Seal up the hive and move it. Now, solid bottom boards have got a bad rap lately because the Langstroth hive has kind of had to adapt to the varroa mite situation. Well, in truth, these are still a good option, and there are a few advantages to this over the ventilated bottom board. And I'm not advocating the use of these over ventilated bottom boards. I think that pest management practices, one of the best parts of that is a ventilated bottom board. But that being said, I do have a lot of these still, and I had 5 left in my garage. I'm making them up today. So the advantages of having a solid bottom board over a ventilated bottom board. The first is that all the particles that come down, including mites, but wax particles and pollen and everything else, can be cleaned up or reused by the bees. So if they're uncapping wax in the winter and the little wax cappings fall down onto the bottom board, they'll clean that up. They'll take it out away from the hive. With a ventilated bottom board, that's not the case. It falls underneath where they can't reach it, and it sits there, and it becomes kind of a bathing pool for wax moth larvae. So with ventilated bottom boards, you do get a lot of wax moth right underneath your hives. Now, they don't necessarily get in your hives, but they can definitely breed underneath your hives. A solid bottom board, another advantage it has is that it is easily movable. So you can pick your hives up with dollies and or whatever, however you pick up your hives. If it's some method where you pick up the hives from the bottom, you don't have to worry about it ripping through the screen that you have on a ventilated bottom board like this one. Now this one is a Walter T. Kelly heavy-duty constructed ventilated bottom board. I would recommend this over any other one on the market. It has a little mite drop board that you can slide in and out. And of course, you want that in a ventilated bottom board if you're treating with something like formic acid or Max mite-applied quick strips. You want to put these in here whenever you're treating for mites. That's something you don't have to do with the solid bottom board. That's another advantage of a solid, is that when you do treat for mites, you just have to make sure that the front is open, but you don't want the bottom open because formic acid is heavier than air and it falls underneath this space and then doesn't kill the mites. So you want to have a way to shut these down, whichever one you decide to buy. This, like I said, is a Walter T. Kelly. And they have 2 of them. This is the heavy duty one, and then they have another one. So another advantage of this is you don't have to close them up. You know, you just have to open the doors if you're going to treat for mites. Most people don't understand this, but this is a reversible design. So in the summer, you have this deep side. You can get a lot more ventilation to the bees. And in the winter, you flip it over and you have this shallow side. Now, I don't ever flip mine over. But when I first got into beekeeping, I found out that what you were supposed to do is, when you construct these, you see this slat here, and then there's a slat here. Now I put them on opposite sides of each other, and I'm going to tell you, this is a little trick I used. I learned to use later in life, and I'll tell you why. It actually works really handy if you're using solid bottom boards and you're putting them together. When you have a solid bottom board, traditionally you're supposed to put those slats on the same side. So you'd have a back to the hive and then a front. But what happens is that, if you can imagine, if this was reversed, if you put it together like this, and this slat is on the back over here, there's a little gap there where you see that slat. Well, spiders love that. They get in there and they build webs, and then when bees miss, and we all know that bees are kind of clumsy flyers when they're full of nectar, when they miss, they get caught in that web and spiders kind of tend to eat them there. The other thing is that when I set it down, if I build it like this, you can see that there's no gap there underneath, so spiders can't get in there. But another good thing about it is if you're catching a swarm in a full-size hive body like this, when the swarm starts to march into the hive, if you have this slat here, they'll actually march right into the hive. But if it's not there, a lot of times they'll march right underneath the bottom board, some of them. So you get a cluster of bees underneath the hive and not in the top. So that's the reason that I started putting the slat here, was to keep swarms. And when I put it flat on the ground, so swarms will walk into the hive rather than some of them walking, underneath of it. So that is a neat little trick. And then of course, it provides a solid platform if you're using skunk guards or something like that to keep skunks out. It provides a solid platform where the whole weight of the hive sits on the skunk guard and not just the end bars. And the final advantage to doing it that way, putting one here and one here, is that it provides some support. It provides some support for this up here, the wider gap. It provides some support for this front or back, and you can see that I don't know if you can see it, but I did glue in there, and I glued the sides as well. And when I glue this, I use PL 375. It's a heavy-duty construction adhesive. This stuff is better than nails or screws or anything else. So this will never come apart. So when you put these together, make sure that you glue everything with a construction adhesive, an indoor and an outdoor construction adhesive. I use PL 375. The reason I glue it is because, one, I don't want it to come apart, and I've never had one even come close to coming apart. But with any hive equipment, when you have a cross cut somewhere, whether it's a hive body or a bottom board, if you don't paint your hive at all, these fibers in the wood that are longitudinal here, they wick up moisture. As that moisture freezes, it expands it. And then from the constant thawing and freezing, you get this to come, it starts to break away and separate. We've probably all seen that. The ends here flip out on both sides, the back and the front. Usually it starts on the front of the hive because usually hives are facing south and they have UV exposure, every day of the year when the sun's out. So it starts here. But if you glue this, these ends will never come out away from there, for one. And then as long as you put a good coat of paint on there, and maintain your hives, they'll never crack and blister like that. So in using construction adhesive for your bottom board, when you construct it, in using that construction adhesive, it will always stay square like this. Now it may get worn in other ways if you slide hives around on the back of your truck or something like that, but if it's just used out in the bee yard, it'll stay exactly the way it was the day you put it together. As long as you use glue, and I use heavy duty screws on the sides, deck screws. You don't have to use those, I don't think. I think once the glue dries, it's pretty much, you know, it's done. It'll never come apart. So the disadvantages of solid bottom boards. The biggest disadvantage is decreased ventilation. So the bees have to put a lot more fanners out in front to circulate air through the hive. With a ventilated bottom board, you'll notice if you have one sitting right next to the other, a ventilated and a solid, you'll notice that there are immediately a lot less fanners out front with a ventilated bottom board. And that's really nice. The other thing is, of course, the mites fall onto the solid bottom board and they can crawl right back up into the hive. That's a key element why I typically use, when I buy new equipment, I buy ventilated stuff. This stuff's been in my garage for I don't know how long, but I decided to put it together, and I'll put it to use next year. Because there are options with solid bottom boards that will achieve the same results as a ventilated bottom board. The biggest advantage to me of solid bottom boards is that it's easily stapled to your hive equipment. So you don't have to worry about strapping it or anything else. You can just pick up the hive and go. Okay, there are options for solid bottom boards to achieve the same results as a ventilated bottom board. You have this already maybe, but you want to get the same results as a ventilated bottom board. There are things that are about the same size as this that just sit on top of it, and it has a screen, and then most of them have a slot for a mite count board too that you slide in and out. So you do have that option where you can buy that as a separate piece. But if you already have these on your hives, why waste them? Just buy that little insert and you can put them in there. The other option is a slatted rack, which you can put on these, and that gives the bees more ventilation as well. So it doesn't achieve the mite drop result like a ventilated bottom board would, where the mites fall through the screen and then they can't really get back up. But it does help quite a bit. So a slatted rack is a good idea too. That increases ventilation in your hive, and most people don't know it, but hives need a lot of ventilation. So in the winter time, for example, when my ventilated bottom boards, I just leave them open all winter. It doesn't bother the bees. And the other ones, I close them down pretty tight, but I always have an upper entrance on all my hives, so there's still ventilation through the hive, but it's nowhere near as good as a ventilated bottom board. But you can achieve close to the same results by putting that other screen on there, so the other insert on there. Anyway, I hope you picked something up in the video, and hey, I'll see you next time.